in other areas, in politics, the wider branches of philosophy. And so that...
Which philosopher speaks to you? I mean, who is it that you think has done?
Well, there's a couple.
Yes.
Ayn Rand would be one for me, and John Searle and others. But there are philosophers out there that have a lot of, I think, really good positions on arguments that for issues that a lot of people have and a lot of concerns people have. So I would think that, but I think that was one of the problems with your talk, was that it was, I think, a false alternative between science and religion. And I definitely don't agree that science can have all the answers to all the problems. As a matter of fact, I think science, without question, cannot, especially in areas of politics, etc. But also one of the issues I wanted to deal with was your issue about producers. I don't agree that you, as a producer of the agenda, for example, have been biased. I think you've done a good job at showing different positions. I know in politics, for example, you've been willing to interview leaders of political parties that are smaller political parties, and I think you've done a very good job doing that. But I'm talking about producers of a lot of other programs as well that aren't taking risks because they're pandering to an audience that is already religious. So that there is a bit of a risk issue.
They're pandering to the liberal biases, not the audiences. They're pandering to the liberal biases that they represent and that their fellow producers represent.
Right.
They're not audiences. Not audiences. I mean, I think they're really, you must appreciate the extent to which the world of media is a world of people who fundamentally, share in their belief systems and their ideas, and it's not pandering to audiences. It's not about selling more newspapers or getting larger ratings. It's about people producers actually represent an outlook, that is individualistic, liberal, cosmopolitan, and as I said, I know very few producers, who are in any way religious.
The thing is, a lot of people aren't going to the TV to get their news anymore. They're going on the internet, and they're going to a lot of bloggers, etc.
Yeah.
I'd say that that television is too much of a risk adverse.
Yes, it is.
It's risk adverse.
Television is risk adverse because television, television networks have certain audiences which they need to protect, because the audiences are used to a certain tone, a certain manner, a certain attitude, and this familiarity that the audiences expect from television as much as they expect from the music they listen at the Toronto Symphony or the movies they go and see. I mean, familiarity is the fundamental impulse that people bring to whatever they consume. And that pertains to people religious, irreligious, atheists. We all want that which we are familiar with.
Well,
and so if you say television networks cater to the audiences which they already have, you're absolutely right.
Right. Yeah, so I do agree that the statement of atheism, I think it was unfair, because atheists, by definition, are just people, it's a motley crew here, believe me. It's a motley crew. One of the philosophical differences were basically you couldn't get them to agree on anything.
So if that's the case, if it's a motley crew, then obviously it's very difficult to know which atheist to go to for which kind of a piece of opinion. So if you're that incoherent as a group, then you can't blame us for not knowing who to approach, for the right piece of opinion.
Ready? Okay. I would very much like to thank you for your talk tonight, because you've raised many points that I've been raising in this organization for a long time. I haven't been here since the fall, precisely because I'm sick and tired of hearing this argument that science is going to save us. And I always bring up the fear of death. There's no answer to that that the scientists can offer. And furthermore, science is in fact destroying the one planet that we've got. And I'm hearing Stephen Hawking talking about how we have 20 years to go find another planet. And I think to myself, he can't be serious, but he is. But I have a question to pose for you. Because it's not a question of science, as you've rightly pointed out. It is a question of political will. Because in Quebec, 85%, I think, of the population still identifies themselves as Catholics. But the Bouchard-Taylor Commission went through that province, well, for what, three months, 2 months? So they're all quite willing to identify as Catholics, but they're very much about keeping the religious influence on the public sphere. Like, you can have a religion, but it's not going to influence public policy, things like that. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and if you foresee something like that happening in English Canada.
Jordan Peterson, and if you want someone who is absolutely eloquent and would absolutely give you a run for your money in trying to make you understand the importance of the archetypal in human affairs, here's the guy to go to. You want to invite him here to give you a talk. He's someone I use often on the agenda because he's very daring and very brave. That's one kind of quality that is very difficult to find in people willing to be on television. Intellectual courage is not something one finds often. But I lost my thread. Once again, Jordan Peterson said that he was at a conference at which it was a pollster has had the very interesting data about the fact that most of the lapsed Catholics in Quebec became fervent supporters of Parti Québécois. That somehow the religious fervor in Quebec that was so profoundly shaped and affected the nature of the culture of the province, were the suddenness with which religiosity began to crumble, that the combustion of that process resulted in the militancy of Parti Québécois. It is, Quebec has managed the problem of maintaining the public sphere, public space, free of religious involvement, precisely because Quebec nationalism became the defining cultural identifier of Quebec in transition. Where Quebec is going to go, we don't know. Obviously, we see that the Quebec nationalism is not as a successful movement as it thought it might become, and likelihood of Quebec separating is slim. Still, this was the necessary stage that Quebecers had to go through. This was the manner in which they went through their process of secularization, by investing their emotional energies in the cause of independent Quebec, that gave them a sense of collectivity that previously was satisfied by the common Catholicism.
I agree with what you're saying, and it's probably going to sound provocative. Science is not the answer, in the sense that what we all struggle with as humans, whether you're religious or not, are two things. I don't feel good, and I don't want to die. Science isn't always going to make you feel good, right? Art does that, religion does that. It's not about truth, it's really about beauty, ultimately. And there aren't many examples of people who are non-theists, who walk around happy, who can see beauty in things, and then talk about it. The four horsemen there, they're charismatic, but they're not a lot of fun, right? You have to be very serious, you have to be very, studious, you have to be on guard to even get half of what they're saying. So guests like that should only be part of the mix. There should be more people who are living examples of being able to cope with those two big questions. I don't feel good, I don't want to die. And people who are walking around who are coping with independently of those tentacles of religion, without having to partake in religious experiences to function. That's really what it comes down to. Maybe we need more celebrities to come out.
Well, France does that. They've been doing that for centuries. Nobody lives better than France, and as we've already indicated, half the country and half the Catholics in France don't believe in God.
Well, we
Not
need more
only just
stars.
the atheists, but half of the people who call themselves Catholic in France don't believe in God.
You see, but the question about the affluence, because the point I've made before, I think pertains to this affluence. See, what's religion? Religion provides people with padding. We all need padding. We all need to keep ourselves away from the abyss of nothingness. And the question is, what will do it for us? Religion can do it. Affluence can do it. French demand for 33-hour work week, and making sure they have strong unions that will protect them from having to work too hard. Okay, does that for them. Whether this is sustainable, whether this is the culture that provides people with a sense of depth, with a sense of spiritual. When I say spiritual, what I mean by that is a sense of connectedness. Because in some ways, I mean, when we imagine, and it's hard to imagine, the fact that for so many centuries, most people lived within a radius of 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers. The entire lives. Religious imagery, biblical imagery, was a movie that expanded their horizons in a way the actual lives could not. We nowadays travel. We have television, we have internet, we can see, we no longer have to imagine. Everything is visible. But we have to understand that for all the centuries, archetypal myths, religious imagination was the largest possible movie people could partake of. And it is that. I mean, it is the question of us having to contend with the constant recreation of the need to understand one's place within everything, and that is the challenge. And in some ways, you say France, you say Sweden. I've lived in Sweden. I speak from experience, and there's no question that a certain calmness of temperament plus affluence is what affords Swedes an ability to be as un-Lutheran as they once used to be. These are not fiery people. These are not people prone to religious exaltation. Even though when you watch Bergman, you recognize in him as someone who remembers his father was a pastor. Someone who remembers a time when severity of Lutheran upbringing, is something that affected him very deeply. I am by no means assured that affluence and social democratic order is going to be a solution to our problems. And mentioning of France and Sweden and Holland, I think for many of you is a guarantee that these kinds of social conditions will offer us a culture that will be able to do without religion. The experience we are referring to is the experience that is no older than 50 years. 50 years. In the context of our entire human history. Let's wait. Let's wait before we jump to conclusions.
I would like to ask you about the situation in which we have maybe 500 television channels available. And we have a situation in which there are organizations like Crossroads Television, Vision here in Canada and Toronto. I know that Crossroads must be smarting under the fact that the CRTC makes them take Muslim programs and Hindu programs and that sort of thing. But really, their mission is to make everybody an evangelical, Bible-believing Christian. And it seems to me that in the United States, there's Pat Robertson's network and things of that nature, so that these people are, with a specific propaganda, are out there doing it. And it seems that the secularism of normal, regular television is not taking into consideration the fact that these people are dominating certain socioeconomic groups, and perhaps what humanists ought to be doing is to organize themselves a little bit more along the lines of a religion and start raising money and opposing or presenting the other side of the coin.
I have a question, but you have CBC, you have TVO. I mean, aren't these outlets of humanist sensibility?
Their humanism is the rather like atheism in a sense. It's the lowest common denominator. It's the do you know what I mean? In other words, the fact that
you want something more explicit, is that it?
Yes, yeah, more positive, more out front. And it seems to me that we don't have a theology, and so we're sort of stuck in a way.
Well, I mean, you see, I won't say you're stuck. I say you don't appreciate the fact that you are lucky enough to have the beliefs that you do, living in a culture which absolutely supports them, which absolutely supports them. You are a fish swimming in your own water. You are a fish swimming in your sea, and for some reason you don't want to recognize that.
Well, I certainly realize that we're yards ahead of Latin America, let's say, or other parts of the world that are very often dominated by religion in much more severe ways. But it just seems to me that there's this propaganda out there.
But it's not propaganda. It's people expressing themselves. I mean, they're propagating by. I mean, one could say that evangelical television propagates because they are looking for new believers. Yes, I mean that will be the most obvious case of propaganda. But they express what they believe. I mean, they do not. They are not creating fictions for who they are. They are who they are. The thing that interests me is that, let us say you get together and you become a very strong, powerful force in the culture, and then there's money and you create a network. What would you like to see on your kind of a network?
We have a story. We have a wonderful story. The Enlightenment is an incredible story, it seems to me, and even the pre-Christian philosophers, let's say Thales, who came up with the idea that natural events have natural causes. What a step forward that was. That was incredible. And it seems to me that we as humanists are neglecting our story, and I think our story is wonderful because it's the story of, in one sense, the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech.
But we have that.
We do, yes,
we have that.
I know. But we don't appreciate it, and I think we are afraid, or that many people are afraid, that the pendulum will swing back.
Oh, I tell you what, we got an email recently from a professor of history at U of T. She said in her email that in a recent discussion with her students, second-year history students at the University of Toronto, about 50% of them said that they don't care much for democracy. The freedom of speech is not an important value to them. And they find it rather chaotic, confusing, and they would rather have someone who knew to take care of things that need to be taken care of. These are second-year students at the University of Toronto.
That fit very nicely into the 18 to 29 demographic of people who support a secular atheist existence.
Who do not believe in democracy.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting and telling.
In what way? I explain to me the connection.
I think the connection is that there's a pretty violent opposition there between people who are the largest growing demographic of secular humanist thinkers, and yet are also, and I've experienced this myself in university and social circles in my teenage years, a growing feeling of sort of disillusionment with democracy and the idea that these things are trivial. It's a very disturbing correlation.